You're embarrassing this entire family." The words cut through the restaurant like a blade, sharp enough that conversations at nearby tables stopped mid-sentence. My mother, Patricia Thomas, sat across from me in her perfectly pressed blouse and pearl necklace, her voice carrying that particular edge she reserved for public humiliation. 32 years old and still playing soldier. When are you going to grow up and get a real job? I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The waiter froze halfway to our table, the water pitcher suspended in midair. A young couple at the next booth pretended to study their menus while straining to hear every word. This wasn't a private family dinner anymore. It was a performance, and my mother was the star. I sat there in my civilian clothes, jeans, a simple navy sweater, nothing that screamed military, but somehow she could smell it on me. The discipline, the posture, the quiet confidence that came from surviving Hell Week, from leading men through impossible missions, from earning respect in places where respect was carved from steel and sweat. "Patricia, please." My voice was steady, controlled. I'd learned long ago that matching her volume only gave her more ammunition. "We're in public." "Don't you Patricia me, I'm your mother." Her manicured fingers drummed against the white tablecloth. "And don't act like you care about public decency. You made your choice when you decided to run around with those thugs pretending to be some kind of hero." The restaurant felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. Other diners weren't even pretending not to listen anymore. A businessman at the bar had actually turned his stool to face us. My mother thrived on this kind of attention, the shocked gasps, the sympathetic looks she'd collect afterward when she told people how her daughter had thrown her life away. "They're not thugs," I said quietly. "They're Navy SEALs." "Oh, excuse me, Navy SEALs." She pronounced it like a curse word. How prestigious, how meaningful. "Tell me, Maeve, what exactly have you accomplished with all this nonsense? What do you have to show for it?" I could have told her about the hostages we'd extracted from a compound in Syria, about the terrorist cell we'd dismantled in Afghanistan, about the night I'd carried a wounded teammate 3 miles through enemy territory while under fire. I could have mentioned the Medal of Valor sitting in my apartment, or the commendations from officers who'd never questioned my presence on their teams. Instead, I reached for my water glass and took a slow sip, buying time, buying space between her words and my response. "You were supposed to be a teacher," she continued, her voice rising again. "Remember that? You had your degree. You had a job offer at Westfield Elementary. Mrs. Henderson still asks about you at church. She says they would have made you department head by now." Mrs. Henderson, sweet woman, but she'd never understand that some people weren't built for chalkboards and parent-teacher conferences. Some people were built for midnight insertions and impossible odds. "That wasn't my path, Mom." "Your path," she laughed, loud and bitter. "Your path has led you nowhere. Look at you, 32, unmarried, no children, no real career. Your cousin Sarah just bought her second house. Your brother has 3 kids and a promotion at the bank. What do you have?" The couple at the next table shifted uncomfortably. The woman whispered something to her husband, probably about how sad it was to see a family fall apart over dinner. My mother caught the exchange and straightened, feeding off their discomfort like oxygen. "I have." "You have nothing," she cut me off with surgical precision. "Nothing but war stories nobody wants to hear, and a stubborn streak that's cost you everything normal people take for granted." The waiter finally approached, probably hoping to diffuse the situation with appetizer specials and wine recommendations. My mother waved him away without looking up, her eyes locked on mine like a heat-seeking missile. "Do you know what people say about you, Maeve? At church, at the grocery store, at your father's office? They ask if you're okay. They wonder if something happened to you over there, something that broke you. And you know what I tell them? I didn't answer. Couldn't. My throat felt like concrete. I tell them you were always broken. Even as a little girl, you couldn't just play with dolls like normal children. You had to build forts, climb trees, get dirty. Your father encouraged it, God rest his soul, but I knew. I knew you'd never fit anywhere respectable. My father. She'd brought him into it, the one person who'd understood why I needed to serve, who'd supported my decision even when it meant deployments and danger and phone calls that came in the middle of the night. He'd been gone for 5 years now, and she still used his memory as a weapon. Dad was proud of me. Your father was too soft. He let you think you could be something you're not. Her voice dropped to a whisper, more dangerous than her shouting. But I see you clearly, Maeve. I see a woman who's wasted her life chasing some fantasy of importance. You're not special. You're not a hero. You're just stubborn and lost. The businessman at the bar was openly staring now. A family with teenagers had paused their conversation to watch our table. My mother basked in it, her performance hitting its crescendo. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The restaurant felt completely silent, every eye trained on our table. This was the moment she'd been building to, the public confrontation where her wayward daughter would either crumble or storm out, giving her weeks of sympathy from neighbors and church friends. But I didn't crumble, and I didn't storm out. Instead, I pulled out my wallet, placed a 20 on the table for my untouched meal, and looked down at the woman who'd given birth to me but never really known me. You're right about one thing, Mom. I'm not normal. Normal people don't volunteer to run toward gunfire while everyone else runs away. Normal people don't spend months in hostile territory making sure other people's children come home safe. Normal people don't sacrifice everything comfortable and easy because they know somebody has to. My voice was quiet, controlled, but it carried. Every person in that restaurant heard every word. I'm not asking you to understand it. I'm not asking you to be proud, but I'm done asking you to respect it. I turned to leave, and that's when she played her final card, the one she'd been saving for maximum impact. Walk away then, just like you walked away from everything decent I tried to give you. But mark my words, Maeve Thomas, when this little fantasy of yours falls apart, when you realize you've wasted your life playing dress-up soldier, don't come crying to me. I won't be here to pick up the pieces. The words hit like shrapnel, designed to wound, designed to make me turn around and engage, to give her the explosive ending she craved. But I'd been trained by the best. I knew how to take fire without breaking formation. I walked to the door, past the staring faces and whispered conversations, past the businessman who'd probably tell his wife about the crazy military daughter and her disappointed mother. I walked out into the cool evening air where the sounds of traffic and ordinary life felt like a symphony after the suffocating silence of that restaurant. My phone buzzed. A text from Commander Jake Morrison, my team leader. Briefing tomorrow at 0800. A new assignment came down from the Pentagon. Bring your A game, Thomas. I looked back at the restaurant window where I could see my mother still sitting at our table, probably gathering sympathy from the waiter about her troubled daughter. She had no idea that in 12 hours, I'd be sitting in a classified briefing room with some of the most dangerous men in the world planning an operation that could save lives or cost them everything. She saw embarrassment. They saw expertise. She saw failure. They saw leadership. She saw a daughter who disappointed her. They saw a warrior who'd earned her place at their table. But that night, standing on the sidewalk outside Romano's Italian restaurant, I wasn't thinking about tomorrow's mission or my team's respect or the gap between who I was and who my mother wanted me to be. I was thinking about my father, who died believing his daughter was exactly who she was supposed to be, and wondering why that had never been enough for the woman who'd raised me. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My childhood was a careful balance between these two worlds. Mornings belonged to my mother. Breakfast at 7 sharp, hair brushed exactly 50 times, clothes laid out the night before. She'd quiz me on proper posture while I ate my oatmeal, remind me to smile at Mrs. Patterson next door, and inspect my fingernails for any trace of dirt that might reflect poorly on our family. But afternoons belonged to Dad. While Patricia attended her bridge club meetings and charity luncheons, I'd slip out to the garage where he'd let me hand him tools and explain how engines worked. He taught me to change oil, replace brake pads, and diagnose problems by listening to the sounds a car made. More importantly, he taught me that figuring things out was just another kind of puzzle, and every puzzle had a solution if you were patient enough to find it. "Your hands are getting dirty," Patricia would say when she found us working together, her voice carrying that familiar note of disapproval. "Maeve needs to come inside and practice piano." I hated piano. My fingers were too clumsy for the delicate keys, too eager to move fast when the music demanded patience. But Patricia had decided that proper young ladies played piano, so 3 times a week I'd sit on that rigid bench while Mrs. Chen tried to teach me Mozart and Chopin. I'd stumble through the scales while watching through the window as neighborhood boys played pickup basketball in the street. "Focus, Maeve," Mrs. Chen would say, tapping my knuckles with her pencil. "Ladies don't daydream." But I wasn't daydreaming. I was calculating. How fast would you have to run to steal second base? What angle would give you the best trajectory for a three-point shot? How much force would it take to climb the old oak tree in our backyard? These weren't idle thoughts. They were planning sessions. When I turned 10, Patricia enrolled me in ballet classes at Miss Rodriguez's Academy of Dance. The studio smelled like rosin and sweat, filled with girls in pink leotards who moved like water while I stumbled like a newborn colt. I tried, genuinely tried, to point my toes and arch my back the way Miss Rodriguez demonstrated. But my body wanted to move differently, stronger, faster, more direct. "Maeve, you're not a linebacker," Miss Rodriguez would say, clapping her hands. "Ballet requires grace, not power." But power was what felt natural. Power was what made sense. The breaking point came during a recital rehearsal for Swan Lake. While the other girls glided across the floor in perfect formation, I missed my mark and crashed into Jenny Morrison, sending both of us tumbling into the mirrors. The sound of our bodies hitting the glass echoed through the studio like gunfire. Patricia's face went white, then red, then white again. She apologized to Miss Rodriguez, to Jenny's mother, to the other parents who'd witnessed her daughter's spectacular failure. That night, she sat me down at the kitchen table and spoke in the calm, controlled voice that always preceded her worst punishments. "What is wrong with you, Maeve? Why can't you just be normal?" I didn't have an answer then. I wouldn't have one for years. Dad found me crying in the garage later that night, sitting on an overturned crate next to his workbench. He didn't ask what was wrong. He'd heard the raised voices through the kitchen window. Instead, he pulled up another crate and sat beside me, his hands still smudged with motor oil from the transmission he'd been rebuilding. "You know," he said quietly, "some engines are built for different things. You've got sports cars that are all about speed, and you've got trucks that can haul a house. Neither one's wrong. They're just designed for different jobs." Mom thinks I'm broken. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photograph on the wall. The young soldier with the bulldozer, ready to clear obstacles or build bridges, depending on what the mission required. "Your mother wants to protect you from getting hurt. She thinks if you just follow the rules, stay safe, everything will work out fine." He looked at me then, his brown eyes serious. "But some people aren't built to stay safe, kiddo. Some people are built to protect other people's safety." I didn't understand what he meant then, but I filed it away like one of his mechanical lessons, something I'd need later when the real work began. The next week, I quit ballet. Patricia was furious, of course, but Dad suggested a compromise. If I had to take lessons, why not try something more practical? He drove me to Sensei Williams's dojo on the other side of town, where the walls were lined with tournament trophies and the smell of discipline hung in the air like incense. "Martial arts teaches respect," he told Patricia, "self-control, important values for a young lady." She agreed reluctantly, probably hoping I'd hate it as much as I'd hated ballet. But the moment I stepped onto those mats, everything clicked. The precise movements, the focus required to execute techniques correctly, the way power and control worked together instead of against each other, it all made sense. Sensei Williams was a former Marine, compact and quiet, with scars on his knuckles and a way of watching that missed nothing. He never told me I was too aggressive or too strong. Instead, he taught me how to channel that energy, how to use my natural instincts strategically. Strength without discipline is just violence, he'd say during sparring practice, but discipline without strength is just dancing. I earned my first belt in 6 months, my second 6 months after that. Patricia attended the promotion ceremonies with the same expression she wore to dental appointments, dutiful but pained. She'd clap politely when my name was called, then spend the car ride home pointing out all the ways the other students' parents dressed more appropriately or sat with better posture. "I just don't understand the appeal," she'd say, adjusting her rearview mirror to examine her lipstick. "All that sweating and grunting, it's so unladylike." But Dad understood. He'd stay after my classes to watch the advanced students spar, nodding approval when I executed a particularly clean throw or perfectly timed counterattack. He never said much, but I could see pride in the way he stood a little straighter when Sensei Williams complimented my technique. By the time I turned 16, I was one of the senior students at the dojo, helping teach younger kids and competing in regional tournaments. I'd won more matches than I'd lost, and my bedroom walls were covered with medals and certificates that Patricia pointedly ignored when showing visitors to the guest bathroom. High school brought new pressures. While my classmates worried about prom dates and college applications, I spent my free time training and studying military history. I'd check out books about famous battles and legendary warriors, reading about Harriet Tubman's strategic mind and Joan of Arc's battlefield courage. These weren't just stories to me, they were case studies in leadership under impossible circumstances. Patricia tried desperately to steer me toward more conventional interests. She signed me up for the student council, hoping I'd discover a passion for politics. She enrolled me in cooking classes at the community center, convinced that domestic skills would eventually win out over my phase. She even arranged a summer internship at her friend's law office, thinking that a taste of professional life would show me the benefits of traditional success. But every attempt to reshape me only clarified what I already knew. I wasn't built for boardrooms and dinner parties. I was built for something else entirely, something that would require every ounce of strength, discipline, and strategic thinking I could muster. The summer before my senior year, Dad took me to a Veterans Day ceremony at the town memorial. We stood among the crowd of families and survivors, listening to speeches about service and sacrifice. When the honor guard performed their rifle salute, the sharp crack of the blanks echoing across the park, I felt something shift inside my chest. "That could be you someday," Dad said quietly, nodding toward the young Marines and their dress blues, "if it's what you really want." I looked at him, this gentle man who'd kept his own service private for so long, who'd found his way to support his daughter's dreams even when they terrified his wife. What if Mom never understands? He was quiet for a moment, watching the flag being folded with ceremonial precision. Sometimes, the people who love us most are the ones who have the hardest time letting us become who we're meant to be. Doesn't mean they don't love us, just means love and understanding aren't always the same thing. That night, I filled out my first military recruitment questionnaire. I didn't tell Patricia about it, but I didn't hide it either. I left the paperwork on the kitchen table, next to her morning coffee cup, like a Declaration of Independence written in navy blue ink. When she found it, the screaming could probably be heard 3 houses away. The silence that followed Patricia's discovery of my recruitment paperwork lasted exactly 13 hours and 42 minutes. I know because I counted every one, watching the digital clock on my nightstand tick past midnight while the house held its breath around me. When she finally spoke, it wasn't the explosion I'd expected. It was something worse, a cold, calculated dismantling that began at breakfast and continued for 3 straight days. "I've been thinking," she said, setting my orange juice down with surgical precision, "about your confusion." Dad looked up from his newspaper, sensing danger. He'd learned to read Patricia's moods the way a sailor reads weather patterns, and this particular storm was gathering fast. It's perfectly normal for young people to rebel, she continued, buttering her toast in slow, deliberate strokes. To want attention, to think they need to prove something. She looked directly at me then, her blue eyes sharp as surgical instruments. But there's a difference between normal teenage acting out and this. She gestured vaguely at the spot where my paperwork had been, as if the very air was contaminated. Patricia, Dad started, but she held up one manicured hand. Robert, please, we've been too permissive. All that martial arts nonsense, letting her spend time in your garage getting filthy. We've enabled this fantasy that she's some kind of warrior. The word came out like she was spitting poison. I've scheduled an appointment with Dr. Hendricks for this afternoon. He specializes in adolescent behavioral issues. I think it's time we address whatever underlying problems are causing these delusions. Dr. Hendricks, the child psychiatrist who'd helped the Morrison boy overcome his unhealthy obsession with video games by prescribing medication and weekly reality checks. Patricia had mentioned his success story at least a dozen times over the past year. I'm not going, I said quietly. Yes, you are. Her voice carried the absolute authority of someone who'd never been successfully challenged. You're 17 years old, which makes you a minor, which makes this my decision. We're going to fix this before you do something truly stupid. Fix, like I was a broken appliance that needed rewiring. Dad folded his newspaper with sharp, angry creases. There's nothing wrong with our daughter, Patricia. Nothing wrong? She laughed, high and bitter. Robert, she wants to join the military. The military. Do you understand what that means? Do you comprehend what she's throwing away? It means she wants to serve her country. It means she wants to get herself killed playing soldier with a bunch of men who will never respect her or protect her or see her as anything more than a liability. Patricia stood up so fast her chair rocked backward. It means she's willing to destroy her entire future for some adolescent fantasy about being important. The argument that followed was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed in our house. Patricia's carefully maintained composure cracked like ice under pressure, revealing years of frustration and fear she'd kept locked away. Dad's quiet dignity transformed into something fierce and protective that I'd never seen before. They fought about my future, about his military service, about her need to control everything she couldn't understand. They fought until Patricia's voice went hoarse and Dad's hands shook with the effort of keeping her temper contained. Finally, Patricia played her trump card. Fine, she said, straightening her blouse and smoothing her hair back into place. If you won't help me save our daughter from herself, I'll do it alone. Maeve, you have a choice. You can go to Dr. Hendricks willingly, get the help you obviously need, and we can put this military nonsense behind us. Or, she paused, letting the word hang in the air like a blade. Or what? Dad asked. Or she can find somewhere else to live while she sorts out her priorities. The kitchen fell silent, except for the humming of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Mrs. Patterson's dog barking next door. Patricia had just threatened to kick her own daughter out of the house for wanting to serve her country. Dad stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the linoleum floor. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it, and somehow more dangerous than Patricia's shouting. You would disown your own child for choosing a path you don't approve of? I would refuse to enable her self-destruction. There's a difference. No, he said, walking to the kitchen counter where Patricia kept her neat stack of church directories and charity organization contact lists. There isn't. He picked up the phone and dialed a number from memory. Jake, it's Robert Thomas. Yeah, I know it's early. Listen, I need a favor. My daughter's interested in the Navy, and her mother and I could use some expert perspective. Would you mind stopping by sometime today? Jake Morrison, Dad's old Army buddy who'd transitioned to the Navy after his first enlistment and eventually made it through SEAL training. I'd met him exactly twice at backyard barbecues, where he'd been polite but quiet, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke and noticed everything. Patricia's face went white. "Robert, you can't be serious." "Dead serious." He hung up the phone and turned back to us. "If Maeve's going to make this decision, she deserves to know what she's actually choosing. Not your fears, not your assumptions, facts." "I won't allow it." "It's not your call anymore, Patricia. She's 17. In 8 months, she'll be 18 and can make her own choices regardless of what we think. The question is whether we're going to support her or lose her." The threat was clear. Dad had finally drawn a line in the sand, and for the first time in my life, I was standing on his side of it. Jake arrived 3 hours later, driving a nondescript sedan that somehow managed to look tactical despite being completely civilian. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt, but there was something about the way he moved, economical, precise, aware, that marked him as military even in street clothes. Patricia answered the door with her most polished smile, the one she reserved for church functions and parent-teacher conferences. "Jake, how wonderful to see you again. Though I have to say, this is all a bit unnecessary." "Mrs. Thomas." Jake's voice was respectful but firm. "I understand your daughter has some questions about military service." "She has some very misguided notions, yes. Perhaps you could help us explain why the military isn't an appropriate choice for young women." Jake looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Actually, ma'am, I was hoping to explain why it might be exactly the right choice for the right young woman." We sat in the living room, Patricia perched on the edge of her favorite chair, Dad relaxed in his recliner, me cross-legged on the floor like I was 10 years old again. Jake took the couch, sitting forward with his hands clasped, treating this like the serious conversation it was. "Tell me why you're interested in the Navy," he said. I'd rehearsed this answer 100 times in my head, but sitting there with all 3 adults watching me, the practiced words evaporated. "I want to matter," I said finally. "I want to do something that makes a difference." Patricia made a small sound of frustration, but Jake held up one hand, never taking his eyes off me. "Mattering takes different forms. You could matter as a teacher, a doctor, or a social worker. Why specifically the military?" I thought about Sensei Williams's lessons on discipline and control, about the way I'd felt watching that honor guard at the Veterans Day ceremony, about the books I'd read describing impossible missions accomplished by people who refuse to accept defeat. Because some problems can't be solved by being nice, or following rules, or hoping someone else handles them. Sometimes you need people who are willing to run toward danger instead of away from it. Jake nodded slowly. "And you think you're one of those people?" "I know I am." Patricia couldn't stay quiet any longer. "Jake, surely you can see how unrealistic this is. The physical demands alone." "Mrs. Thomas," Jake interrupted gently, "with respect, I've seen 18-year-old girls outperform grown men in situations that would break most people. Physical strength matters, but it's not everything. Mental toughness, adaptability, the ability to think clearly under pressure, those qualities don't have a gender requirement." He turned back to me. "That said, if you're serious about this path, you need to understand what you're signing up for. It's not just about wanting to make a difference. It's about being willing to sacrifice everything, comfortable and predictable, for something that might kill you." The room went dead quiet. "Most people who start military training don't finish it. Of those who do finish, most never see real combat. Of those who do see combat, most come home changed in ways they didn't expect. And if you're thinking about elite units like the SEALs..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The dropout rate for SEAL training is over 80%. The men who make it through are the ones who would rather die than quit, literally. Are you prepared for that level of commitment?" I thought about every ballet class where I'd felt like I was wearing someone else's skin, every piano lesson where my fingers had fought the keys instead of flowing across them, every moment of my life when I'd tried to be the daughter Patricia wanted and felt like I was suffocating. Yes. Patricia stood up abruptly, her composure finally shattering completely.
This is insane. Jake, I invited you here to talk sense into her, not encourage this suicide mission. She's 17 years old. She doesn't know what she's saying. Jake stood too, his movements fluid and controlled. Mrs. Thomas, I've worked with 17-year-olds who had more tactical awareness and emotional maturity than officers twice their age. Age doesn't determine readiness. Character does. He looked at me one more time, studying his face like he was reading a map. If you're serious about this, start training now. Physical conditioning, mental preparation, studying everything you can about military history and strategy. SEAL training doesn't just test your body, it tests your mind, your will, your ability to lead others when everything's falling apart. He handed me a business card with just a phone number printed on it. Call me in 6 months. If you're still interested, and if you've done the work, we'll talk about next steps. After he left, Patricia didn't speak to me for the rest of the day, or the next day, or the day after that. She moved through the house like I was invisible, setting 2 places at the dinner table instead of 3, washing 2 cups instead of 3, having conversations with Dad that carefully avoided mentioning their daughter's existence. It was psychological warfare, precise and brutal, designed to make me understand exactly what my choice would cost.
But something had changed during Jake's visit. For the first time, an adult, a real warrior, not just someone playing one in their imagination, had looked at me and seen potential instead of problems. The silence continued for 2 weeks. Then Patricia made her final play. She was waiting for me when I got home from school, sitting at the kitchen table with a manila folder and the expression of someone about to deliver a terminal diagnosis. "Sit down, Maeve. We need to talk." The manila folder contained my entire future, or at least Patricia's version of it. She spread the contents across the kitchen table with the methodical precision of a prosecutor laying out evidence. College brochures from Connecticut College, Fairfield University, and Sacred Heart. A letter of recommendation from Mrs. Henderson at the elementary school. An application for a summer internship at Hartford Insurance, where Patricia's college roommate worked in human resources. Even a business card for Dr. Rebecca Walsh, a life coach for young women in transition. "I've been busy," Patricia said, her voice artificially calm. "While you've been indulging in your military fantasy, I've been working on realistic alternatives." I picked up the Sacred Heart brochure, flipping through glossy photos of students studying in pristine libraries and walking across manicured lawns. Everyone looked happy, safe, normal. Everything I wasn't. "Education major," Patricia continued, tapping the course catalog, "with a minor in child psychology. Mrs. Henderson has guaranteed you a position at Westfield Elementary upon graduation. Starting salary is $38,000 with full benefits and summers off to spend with your own children someday." She pulled out another set of papers, apartment listings near the college campuses, all carefully highlighted in yellow. "I've already put deposits down on 3 different options, close enough that you can come home on weekends, far enough that you'll have independence. You can start fresh, meet the right kind of people, put this whole military phase behind you." Dad walked into the kitchen, took one look at the table, and poured himself a cup of coffee without saying a word. He'd learned to pick his battles, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "And if I say no?" I asked. Patricia's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Then you'll be making a very expensive mistake, because I've also been in touch with your guidance counselor, Mrs. Rodriguez. Interesting conversation." My stomach dropped. Mrs. Rodriguez had been helping me research military academies and ROTC programs. She'd even written a preliminary letter of recommendation for my Naval Academy application. "Turns out," Patricia continued, "parental consent is required for military enlistment before age 18. But more importantly, parental cooperation is essential for any realistic path to officer training. Naval Academy nominations come through congressional representatives who expect to see unified family support. ROTC scholarships require detailed financial information that only parents can provide." She leaned back in her chair, satisfaction radiating from every pore. "In other words, sweetheart, you need me.
Whether you like it or not, your military dreams depend entirely on my signature, my tax returns, and my willingness to support your application. And I will never, ever give you that support. The words hit like physical blows. I'd spent months researching different paths to military service, but I'd been focused on the training requirements, the academic standards, the physical demands. I hadn't fully grasped how much control parents maintained over their children, even at 17. So here's what's going to happen, Patricia said, gathering the papers into neat stacks. You're going to choose one of these colleges. You're going to major in education. You're going to build a sensible, respectable life that doesn't involve getting shot at by terrorists or whatever ridiculous scenarios you've been imagining. Dad finally spoke. Patricia, you can't force her. I can and I will. Her voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who'd spent weeks planning this moment. Robert, I know you're being supportive, but look at what your encouragement has done. She's completely lost touch with reality. Someone has to save her from herself. I stared at the brochures, at the smiling faces of students who'd probably never questioned whether their path was right for them, who'd never felt the suffocating weight of other people's expectations. You're trying to buy my life, I said quietly. I'm trying to save it. Patricia's mask slipped for a moment, revealing something desperate underneath. Maeve, you're my only daughter, my only child. Do you think I want to spend the next 20 years wondering if every phone call is someone telling me you're dead? Do you think I want to explain to people that my daughter chose violence over a normal life? It's not about violence, it's about service. It's about you being too stubborn to admit you're wrong. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. You have until graduation to decide. College applications are due in 6 months. Military recruiting stations will still be there in 4 years if you still want to throw your life away after getting a proper education. But we both knew that wasn't true. The window for military service was narrow, especially for someone with officer ambitions. By the time I finished college, I'd be 22, past the optimal age for elite training programs. The path Patricia was offering wasn't a delay, it was a permanent detour. That night, I called Jake Morrison. I'd been saving his number for 6 months, waiting until I was ready to take the next step. But Patricia's ultimatum had changed everything. Jake, it's Maeve Thomas, Robert's daughter. Maeve, good to hear from you. How's the training going? I'd been running 5 miles every morning before school, working out at the local gym, studying military strategy texts from the library. But none of that mattered now. I need your advice about something. My mom, she's trying to block me from enlisting. Says she won't sign the paperwork or support academy applications. Jake was quiet for a long moment. That's her right as your parent. I know, but I also know this is what I'm supposed to do. I can feel it. And if I wait 4 years, if I let her force me into college first, I'll lose my chance. Maybe. Or maybe you'll gain perspective. You don't believe that. Another pause. No, I don't. Elite military training is a young person's game. Every year you wait, the odds get worse. But Maeve, I can't advise you to go against your parents. That's not my place. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to tell me the truth about my options. Jake sighed. The truth is, there are ways around parental consent. Emancipation, waiting until 18, getting married. But all of them come with serious consequences. You'd be burning bridges you might never be able to rebuild.
What if the bridges are already burned? Then you have to decide what matters more, your family's approval or your own path. But understand, once you make that choice, you can't take it back. Your mother might forgive you eventually, but she'll never forget that you chose something else over her. I hung up feeling more isolated than ever. Dad tried to bridge the gap over the next few days, suggesting compromises that satisfied no one. Maybe I could do ROTC in college, he offered. Maybe I could consider the Coast Guard instead of the Navy. Maybe we could all sit down with a family counselor and work through this together. But Patricia had moved beyond compromise. She'd drawn her line in absolute terms: conform or be cast out. There was no middle ground in her worldview. No space for daughters who insisted on writing their own stories. The breaking point came 2 weeks before my 18th birthday. I'd been accepted to 3 colleges, all of them Patricia's choices, all of them offering paths I had no intention to follow. I'd also been quietly researching Navy recruitment procedures and discovered that once I turned 18, I could enlist without parental consent. I found Patricia in her study, paying bills with her usual methodical precision. The room was her sanctuary, decorated in soft pastels and filled with romance novels she thought I didn't know she read. It smelled like vanilla candles and disappointment. "Mom, we need to talk." She looked up, pen poised over a check. "If this is about the military again, it's about my future, my real future, not the one you've planned for me." Patricia set down her pen and gave me her full attention, the way she did when she sensed a serious challenge to her authority. "I'm turning 18 in 2 weeks. After that, I can make my own decisions about enlistment. You'll also be entirely on your own financially. No college fund, no support, no place to come home to when reality sets in." The threat was clear and absolute. Choose military service, lose your family permanently. You'd really disown your own daughter for following her dreams? I'd refuse to enable your self-destruction. Yes. Patricia's voice was steady, but I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition that she was about to lose this battle, one way or another. Then I guess we have nothing more to discuss. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me at the door. "Maeve, you think you're brave, choosing this path, but real courage is admitting when you're wrong. Real strength is accepting that some dreams aren't worth pursuing." I looked back at her, this woman who'd raised me with such fierce love and such narrow vision, who genuinely believed she was saving me from myself. "You're right about one thing, Mom. This does take courage, just not the kind you think." 3 days later, I walked into the Navy recruitment office in Hartford. Petty Officer First Class Williams was a no-nonsense woman in her 30s who'd heard every sob story and crazy dream the military had to offer. She looked me up and down, taking in my nervous energy and obvious determination. "How old are you?" 17, but I turn 18 next week. "Parents on board with this?" I met her eyes. "No, ma'am, they're not." Williams nodded, unsurprised. "Family support makes everything easier, but it's not required. Are you sure you want to do this without them?" I thought about Patricia's ultimatum, about the colleges she'd chosen, about the life she'd mapped out in careful detail. Then I thought about Jake Morrison's question. "Are you prepared for that level of commitment?" "Yes, ma'am, I'm sure." "Then let's talk about what you're signing up for." 2 hours later, I walked out with preliminary paperwork and a ship date 6 months after my high school graduation. I will leave for boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois on September 15th. If I made it through basic training, I'd have the chance to try for the most elite units the Navy had to offer. That night at dinner, Patricia asked about my day with forced casualness. I could have lied, could have bought myself more time before the final confrontation. Instead, I told her the truth. "I enlisted today. I ship out in September." Patricia's fork clattered against her plate. Dad stopped chewing, his eyes moving between us like he was watching a car accident in slow motion. "You what?" "I enlisted in the Navy. I'm going to try for the SEALs." For the first time in my life, I saw Patricia completely speechless. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, her face cycling through emotions too quickly to track. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Get out." "Patricia," Dad started, "get out of my house, right now. If you want to throw your life away, do it somewhere else. I won't watch." The words hung in the air like smoke from a destroyed building. This was it, the moment of complete severance, the point where love and understanding finally proved to be different things entirely. I stood up, my legs steadier than I'd expected. "I'll be gone by tomorrow." "Forever," Patricia said, tears streaming down her face. I packed that night, while Dad sat on my bed, watching me fold clothes with military precision I'd learned from YouTube videos. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? But his presence was enough. When I finished, he handed me an envelope. "Your mother doesn't know about this." Inside was $5,000 in cash and a note. "For when you need to come home, Dad." "You don't have to choose sides," I told him.
I'm not choosing sides, kiddo. I'm choosing you. That was the last conversation I had in my childhood bedroom. By morning, I was gone. Boot camp at Great Lakes was everything I'd expected and nothing I was prepared for. The physical challenges, endless push-ups, obstacle courses, swimming tests, those I could handle. I'd been training for months, and my body adapted quickly to the demands. But the mental warfare, the systematic breaking down of everything I thought I knew about myself, that caught me off guard.
Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez was a compact woman with arms like steel cables and a voice that could cut through armor plating. She took one look at me during intake processing and marked me as someone who needed special attention. Thomas, you think you're tough because you did some karate? No, Chief. You think you're special because you walked away from Mommy and Daddy? No, Chief. You think you belong here with these sailors? I hesitated for half a second, a lifetime in military time. I said, "Do you think you belong here, recruit?" "Yes, Chief." That hesitation cost me 2 weeks of extra duty and a reputation as someone who needed to prove herself twice as hard as everyone else. Rodriguez wasn't trying to break me down because she doubted my abilities. She was testing whether I had the absolute certainty required to lead others into situations where doubt could get people killed. The other recruits came from everywhere: inner cities, small towns, military families, broken homes. Most of them had never seen a female recruit who talked about trying out for elite units. Some were supportive. Others made it clear they thought I was delusional. "SEALs?" laughed Peterson, a cocky kid from Alabama with more muscles than brains. "Sweetheart, you know that stands for Sea, Air, and Land, right? Not Sea, Air, Land, and Ladies Auxiliary." I didn't respond. Rodriguez had taught us that actions spoke louder than trash talk, and I was saving my voice for when it mattered. The breaking point came during week 6, during a nighttime navigation exercise in the woods surrounding the base. We were divided into squads and given coordinates to reach before dawn, carrying full packs and operating under blackout conditions. My squad included Peterson and 3 other guys who'd made it clear they didn't want to follow a female squad leader. 2 hours into the exercise, Peterson decided he'd had enough of taking orders from someone he considered beneath him. When I called for a route change to avoid a swampy area that would slow us down, he openly challenged my decision. "That's the long way, Thomas. We go straight through." "Negative. We stick to high ground and maintain our pace." "I'm not taking orders from some wannabe who thinks she can play soldier." The other squad members stopped moving, sensing the confrontation that had been building for weeks. This was the moment that would determine whether I could actually lead under pressure or if Peterson was right about me being out of my depth. I stepped closer to Peterson, close enough that he could see I wasn't backing down. "You can follow my orders, or you can explain to Chief Rodriguez why your squad failed to complete the mission because you were more interested in proving a point than accomplishing the objective." Peterson was bigger than me, stronger than me, and absolutely convinced he was right. But he'd made a tactical error. He'd challenged me publicly, which meant backing down would cost him credibility with the entire squad. "Make me," he said. What happened next lasted exactly 37 seconds. I used every technique Sensei Williams had ever taught me about leverage, momentum, and finding pressure points that had nothing to do with body weight. When it was over, Peterson was face down in the mud with my knee between his shoulder blades and my full weight pressing down on his back. "Are you ready to complete the mission, Peterson?" He nodded, gasping. I let him up, helped him to his feet, and continued with the navigation exercise like nothing had happened. We reached our coordinates 40 minutes ahead of schedule. Word of the incident spread through the entire company by morning chow. Instead of the ridicule I'd expected, I found something different: respect. Peterson never challenged me again, and more importantly, other recruits started asking for my help with techniques they were struggling with. Chief Rodriguez called me into her office that afternoon. "Heard you had some excitement during night nav." "Yes, Chief. I handled a disciplinary issue within my squad." She studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Thomas, what do you know about the Navy's Special Warfare Program?" "I know it's the most demanding training in the military. I know most people who attempt it don't make it through.
and I know it's what I want to do with my life. You know it's never been completed by a woman. Yes, Chief. You know that the physical standards aren't adjusted for gender. You'll be expected to perform at the same level as men who outweigh you by 50 pounds. I understand, Chief. Rodriguez leaned back in her chair. I've been watching you for 6 weeks, Thomas. You've got something most recruits don't. You know how to lead without ego. That business with Peterson could have turned into a pissing match, but you made it about mission accomplishment instead of personal dominance. She pulled out a folder and slid it across her desk. These are preliminary screening requirements for naval special warfare, physical fitness standards, psychological evaluations, security clearance applications. If you're serious about this path, you need to start the process now while you're still in basic training. I opened the folder, scanning pages of requirements that looked impossible. 500-yard swim in 12 minutes, 50 push-ups in 2 minutes, 50 sit-ups in 2 minutes, 10 pull-ups with no time limit. But those were just the entry-level standards. The real tests came later, in training programs designed to find the absolute limits of human endurance and mental toughness. Chief, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Do you think I can make it? Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Thomas, I've seen a lot of recruits come through here. Most of them are running towards something: money, adventure, college benefits. A few are running away from something: bad neighborhoods, family problems, legal trouble. But you're different. You're running toward yourself. She stood up, signaling the end of our meeting.
Whether you make it through SEAL training isn't up to me. It's up to you. But I'll tell you this. If you quit, it won't be because you weren't strong enough or tough enough. It'll be because you decided the cost was higher than you were willing to pay. That night, I called Dad from the payphone in the barracks common area. It was the first time I'd spoken to anyone from home since leaving for boot camp. "How are you doing, kiddo?" "I'm good, Dad. Really good. Boot camp is tough, but I'm handling it." "Your mother asks about you," he said quietly. "She won't admit it, but she does." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar ache of Patricia's absence. Despite everything, I missed her. Missed our arguments, missed her impossible standards, missed the certainty of knowing exactly what she expected from me. "How is she?" "Stubborn, proud, worried sick about you, even though she'd never say it out loud." Dad's voice carried the exhaustion of someone caught between two people he loved who couldn't find their way back to each other. "I applied for special warfare training," I told him. "SEAL training?" "Yeah, it's what I've been working toward." Dad was quiet for so long I wondered if we'd been disconnected. Finally, he spoke. "Your mother's going to have opinions about that. What about you? What do you think?" "I think you've never backed down from a challenge in your life, and I don't expect you to start now. I think if anyone can make it through that training, it's you. And I think I'm proud of you no matter what happens." We talked for a few more minutes about safe topics: the weather, his work at the garage, neighbors I'd grown up with. But when I hung up, I felt more centered than I had since leaving home. I had one parent's support, and that would have to be enough. Graduation from boot camp came 8 weeks later. I finished second in my company academically and first in physical fitness scores. Chief Rodriguez presented me with the Outstanding Recruit Award during the ceremony, shaking my hand with a grip that conveyed everything she couldn't say in front of the assembled families and officials. "Don't let them break you, Thomas, but don't be afraid to let them remake you." I looked out into the audience of proud parents and relatives, searching for familiar faces I knew wouldn't be there. Dad had wanted to come, but Patricia had made it clear that attending would be seen as choosing sides in a war that wasn't his to fight. Instead, I saw Jake Morrison sitting in the back row, wearing a suit that looked uncomfortable on his frame but appropriate for the occasion. He caught my eye and nodded once, a small gesture that meant everything. After the ceremony, Jake found me outside the barracks where I was loading my gear into a duffel bag. "Congratulations, sailor." "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure anyone would be here." "Your dad wanted to be here. He asked me to give you this." Jake handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was my father's Purple Heart Medal from Vietnam, along with a note: "For courage in the face of impossible odds. Love, Dad."
I stared at the medal, overwhelmed by the weight of what it represented. My father had earned this through blood and sacrifice, and now he was passing it on to someone he believed worthy of carrying it forward. Jake, can I ask you something? Am I crazy for thinking I can make it through SEAL training? Jake studied me for a moment, the same way he had that day in our living room when Patricia was trying to talk sense into her delusional daughter. Crazy? Maybe, but crazy and impossible aren't the same thing. The question isn't whether you're strong enough or smart enough or tough enough. The question is whether you want it badly enough to keep going when everything inside you is screaming to quit. And you think I do? I think you walked away from everything comfortable and familiar to chase something that might destroy you. That tells me you understand the stakes. He started to walk away, then turned back. SEAL training starts in 3 months. Use that time wisely. The physical preparation you've done so far is just the beginning. The real test is mental. Learning to function when your body is broken, your mind is clouded, and failure means letting down your team. That night, alone in temporary quarters while waiting for my next assignment, I called the Special Warfare Recruiting Office and confirmed my slot in the next Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL BS training class. Class 247 would begin in 12 weeks. Out of the 180 candidates who started, statistics said only about 30 would make it to graduation. I intended to be one of them. Not because I was stronger or tougher than the men I'd be competing against, but because I had something they might not: absolute clarity about why I was there. I wasn't trying to prove my mother wrong anymore. I wasn't trying to live up to my father's expectations. I was trying to become the person I'd always known I could be, the one who ran toward danger instead of away from it, the person Patricia Thomas had raised, whether she realized it or not. Boots training at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado was a different kind of hell than anything I'd experienced. Boot camp had been about breaking down civilian habits and building military discipline. SEAL training was about finding the absolute limits of human capability and then pushing past them. Class 247 started with 180 candidates on a gray Monday morning in September. By the end of the first week, we were down to 156. The instructors didn't waste time with motivational speeches or explanations. They simply began the systematic process of identifying who belonged there and who was wasting everyone's time. Instructor Martinez was a legend among the SEAL community, a man who'd completed more combat deployments than most people had birthdays, with scars that mapped out a career spent in the world's most dangerous places. He looked at our class formation with the expression of someone examining livestock at auction. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the beginning of the most miserable period of your lives. For the next 6 months, we are going to test every aspect of your character. We're going to find your breaking point, and then we're going to find out what's left when you're completely broken.
He walked along our ranks, stopping occasionally to study a particular candidate's face or posture. When he reached me, he paused longer than with the others. Thomas, right? The one who thinks she's going to be the first female SEAL? I'm here to find out, instructor. You're here because someone decided to conduct a social experiment with my training program. I'm here to ensure that the experiment doesn't get anyone killed. The words stung, but I'd expected worse. What I hadn't expected was the reaction from my classmates. Instead of the snickering I anticipated, I heard muttered agreement from several candidates. They weren't laughing at Martinez's comment. They were nodding. That first week was designed to weed out anyone who wasn't completely committed. We ran everywhere, to chow, to train evolutions, to the bathroom. We carried boats over our heads for miles along the beach. We performed endless calisthenics in the surf zone while instructors screamed corrections and criticism. The cold was the worst part. San Diego's ocean temperature in September hovered around 65 degrees, which sounds pleasant until you're submerged in it for hours while performing complex tasks with numb fingers and chattering teeth. Hypothermia became a constant companion, something we learned to function with rather than avoid. During the second week, we started log PT, physical training with telephone poles that weighed over 400 pounds and required perfect teamwork to manipulate.
This was where individual strength mattered less than the ability to synchronize with your boat crew, to anticipate what your teammates needed before they asked for it. My boat crew consisted of 5 other candidates: Rodriguez from Texas, a former college football player; Chen from California, whose father had been a Marine; Williams from Detroit, who'd grown up in neighborhoods where survival required constant awareness; Kowalski from Wisconsin, quiet and methodical; and Patterson from Georgia, who quoted Sun Tzu during rest breaks and treated every evolution like a chess match. We were an unlikely team, but we worked. When Rodriguez's shoulder started giving out during a particularly brutal log carry, Chen and I adjusted our grip to take more weight without being asked. When Williams struggled with underwater knot tying exercises, Patterson stayed after hours to help him practice in the base swimming pool. When Kowalski got food poisoning from questionable chowhall fish, we covered his duties during room inspections and gear maintenance. But the instructors weren't interested in our camaraderie. They were interested in breaking us, individually and collectively. Hell Week started on a Sunday night without warning. We were awakened by blank gunfire, smoke grenades, and instructors screaming through bullhorns. For the next 5.5 days, we would get approximately 4 hours of sleep total while performing continuous physical and mental challenges designed to push us past the point of rational thought. "The only easy day was yesterday," the instructors chanted as we stumbled through surf torture, boat races, and obstacle courses that seemed to stretch on forever. The only easy day was yesterday. By Wednesday, hallucinations were common. I saw my mother standing on the beach during a night navigation exercise, shaking her head in disappointment. I saw my father cheering from the pier during boat races that weren't actually happening. I saw Jake Morrison running beside me during conditioning runs, offering advice I was too exhausted to process. The boats became our universe. Wherever we went, we carried them. Over our heads on land, through the surf zone, across miles of sand that felt like quicksand under our waterlogged boots. The weight distributed among 6 people should have been manageable, but exhaustion and hypothermia made everything exponentially harder. "Thomas," Instructor Martinez's voice cut through my fatigue during Thursday night's beach run. "You're slowing down your boat crew." He was right. My legs felt like concrete, and I was struggling to maintain the pace that Rodriguez and Chen were setting. But quitting wasn't an option, not just for me, but for my entire team. In SEAL training, individual failure meant team failure. "I've got it, instructor." "No, you don't. You're about to ring that bell and take the easy way out." The bell. Every candidate knew about the bell, a brass ship's bell mounted on a post near the instructor platform. 3 rings meant you were done, finished, ready to return to the regular Navy with no shame and no regrets. Dozens of candidates had already rung that bell during the first 4 days of Hell Week. "Patterson," Martinez barked, "your boat crew member is falling behind. What are you going to do about it?" Patterson, who'd been running beside me for the past mile, suddenly dropped back and positioned himself behind me. "Thomas, grab my belt." I grabbed the back of Patterson's utility belt, and he began towing me forward, maintaining our boat crew's pace while bearing the additional burden of my failing strength. It was a violation of everything the instructors preached about individual accountability, but it was also exactly what SEALs did for each other in the field. Martinez said nothing, but I caught something that might have been approval flickering across his face. Friday night, the final night of Hell Week, brought the last evolution, a simulated combat mission that required us to infiltrate an enemy position, gather intelligence, and exfiltrate without being detected. We'd been awake for over 120 hours, and most candidates were operating on pure instinct and stubbornness. My boat crew was assigned to approach the target from the ocean side, using combat swimmer techniques we'd barely learned. The water was rougher than usual, with waves that made navigation difficult and currents that wanted to push us off course. "Thomas, you're our navigator," Patterson whispered as we prepared our gear. "Your call on the approach route." The responsibility terrified me. After 5 days of following orders and enduring punishment, suddenly I was being asked to make decisions that could determine whether our team succeeded or failed. But this was what SEAL training was really about, developing leaders who could function under impossible circumstances. I studied the target area, calculating tides, enemy positions, and exfiltration points. We go wide left, approach from the north. Longer swim, but we avoid the main security positions. You sure? Rodriguez asked, doubt creeping into his voice. I'm sure. The infiltration took 3 hours. We swam through kelp forests that caught our equipment and threatened to separate us. We low-crawled across rocky terrain that tore through our uniforms and scraped skin raw. We coordinated hand signals in darkness that teammates disappeared if they moved more than arm's length away. But we made it. We gathered the required intelligence, photographed the designated targets, and exfiltrated without being detected by the role-playing instructors who were hunting us. At sunrise, Saturday morning, 47 candidates remained from the original 182. We stood in formation on the beach on the sand, exhausted, hypothermic, and proud in ways we'd never experienced before. Instructor Martinez walked along our ranks one final time, studying faces that had been transformed by 6 months of systematic torture.
Congratulations, you have completed Hell Week. You have proven that you can function when your body is broken and your mind is screaming at you to quit. But this is not graduation. This is simply proof that you might have what it takes to become a SEAL. He stopped in front of me, his expression unreadable. Thomas, step forward. Every eye in the formation focused on me as I moved 3 paces ahead of my classmates. This was it, the moment I'd been anticipating since I first walked into that recruitment office. Either I belonged here or I didn't. Candidates, I want you to look at Petty Officer Thomas. 5 days ago, some of you questioned whether she belonged in this training. You wondered if having a woman in your boat crew would make you weaker, slower, more vulnerable. The beach fell silent except for the sound of waves and our collective breathing. During the final evolution, Thomas navigated her team through a complex infiltration using tactical knowledge she mastered in 6 months of training. When Rodriguez cramped up during the swim, she stayed with him instead of advancing to maintain her own timeline. When the extraction went wrong and enemy forces nearly compromised their position, she made the tactical decision to abort the primary plan and execute the backup extraction, saving her entire team. Martinez's voice carried across the formation with absolute authority. Petty Officer Thomas didn't complete Hell Week because she's a woman trying to prove herself in a man's world. She completed it because she's a warrior who understands that mission accomplishment and team welfare come before personal glory. That makes her exactly what we're looking for in a SEAL. He turned to address me directly. Thomas, your mother called the base commander yesterday, demanding to know if you were still alive. When she was told you were, she asked if you were ready to quit yet. I told her that quitting didn't appear to be in your vocabulary. My breath caught. Patricia had called? After 2 years of silence, she'd reached out to check on me. What did she say? Martinez's expression might have contained the faintest hint of amusement. She said that sounded about right, and that if you were too stubborn to come home, someone better make sure you knew what you were doing out there. That afternoon, I called home for the first time since graduation from boot camp. Dad answered on the second ring, like he'd been waiting by the phone. Maeve, thank God. Are you okay? Your mother has been pacing around this house for a week like a caged tiger. I'm okay, Dad. I made it through Hell Week. I knew you would. His voice carried a mixture of pride and relief that made my throat tight. Your mother wants to talk to you. Dad, I don't think... She's been carrying around a piece of paper with this phone number on it for 3 days, working up the courage to call. Just talk to her, kiddo. There was a rustling sound, whispered conversation I couldn't make out, and then Patricia's voice came through the line, shakier than I'd ever heard it. Maeve, are you hurt? Are you safe? I'm safe, Mom. Tired, but safe. I saw on the news. They said SEAL training. People die during that training. Some do. I didn't. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. I still don't understand why you chose this. I know. But I'm glad you're alive. It wasn't an apology or an acceptance, but it was something. A crack in the wall she'd built between us. A recognition that love and understanding could coexist with disagreement. Mom, I've got 18 more weeks of training, but when I graduate,
Would you want to come to the ceremony? Another long silence. Would you want me there? Yes, I would. Then I'll be there. After I hung up, I sat alone in the temporary barracks, holding my father's Purple Heart and thinking about the conversation I'd just had. Patricia still thought I was making a mistake. She still believed there were safer, more sensible ways to build a meaningful life. But for the first time since I'd walked out of her house, she was willing to witness the choice I'd made, instead of simply opposing it. That night, I wrote the first letter I'd sent home in 2 years. It was short, simple, and honest. Dear Mom and Dad, I know this isn't the life you planned for me, but it's the life I was meant to live. Thank you for raising me strong enough to choose it. Love, Maeve. I mailed it the next morning, then reported for the next phase of SEAL training. 18 weeks to go, and for the first time since leaving home, I wouldn't be facing them entirely alone. Standing on the sidewalk outside Romano's restaurant, I looked at Commander Morrison's text about tomorrow's mission briefing and felt the familiar surge of purpose that came with being needed. But tonight, for the first time in years, that sense of purpose was complicated by something else. A recognition that the gap between who I was and who Patricia wanted me to be might finally be closing. I didn't go home to my apartment right away. Instead, I drove to the harbor where I sometimes went to think, parking overlooking the water where Navy ships moved in and out like shadows against the moonlight. My phone rang as I sat there, Dad's contact appearing on the screen. Hey kiddo, how did dinner go? His voice carried the careful neutrality of someone who'd spent years navigating between two people he loved who couldn't find their way to each other. She told my career embarrassing and told me I'm wasting my life playing dress-up soldier. Dad sighed. She's scared, Maeve. She's been scared since the day you shipped out to boot camp, and fear makes her say things she doesn't mean. She seemed pretty sure about what she meant.
Did she tell you about the scrapbook? I paused. What scrapbook? The one she's been keeping since you graduated from SEAL training. Every newspaper article that mentions your unit, every commendation ceremony that gets covered in the base newsletter, she clips them all out and pastes them in this book she keeps hidden in her desk drawer. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Dad, that's not... She never said. Your mother has never been good at admitting when she's wrong, but that doesn't mean she doesn't know it. She's proud of you, Maeve. She just doesn't know how to reconcile that pride with the fear of losing you. We talked for another 20 minutes about safe topics and dangerous ones, about the mission I couldn't discuss, and the family dynamics that affected everything. When I hung up, I sat in my car for a long time, thinking about Patricia's hidden scrapbook and what it meant that she'd been following my career from a distance while maintaining her public disapproval. The next morning's briefing was classified at a level that required special clearance just to enter the building. Commander Morrison's face was grimmer than usual as he laid out the situation. American hostages held by a terrorist cell in a compound outside Mogadishu, diplomatic efforts exhausted, a narrow window for military intervention before the hostages were moved to a more secure location. This is a direct action mission, Morrison explained, his laser pointer highlighting satellite imagery of the target compound. Fast insertion, secure the hostages, neutralize any threats, extract before enemy reinforcements arrive. Timeline is critical. We have maybe 20 minutes from touchdown to wheels up. The mission would require a team of 8 SEALs, myself included, working in perfect coordination under circumstances where a single mistake could mean death for the hostages or the rescue team. It was exactly the kind of operation I'd trained for, exactly the reason I'd walked away from Patricia's safe, predictable path. Thomas, Morrison said after the formal briefing ended, you're taking point on hostage extraction. Rodriguez and Chen will cover your advance, Patterson handles communications, Williams and Kowalski secure the perimeter. Questions? Taking point meant being first through the door, first to engage enemy forces, first to reach the hostages who would be terrified, confused, and possibly injured. It was the most dangerous position and the most critical one, the person who would determine whether the mission succeeded or failed. No questions, sir. Good. Wheels up at 2300 hours. Use today to prep your gear and get your affairs in order. This one's going to be tight. That afternoon, I called Patricia. I'd never contacted her before a mission. Too much risk of saying something that sounded like goodbye. Too much chance of hearing doubt in her voice when I needed absolute confidence. But Dad's revelation about the scrapbook had changed something. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice carrying the clipped formality she used when she was trying to maintain emotional distance. Maeve, this is unexpected. Hi, Mom. I just wanted to call and talk. About last night? Because I said what needed to be said, and I'm not going to apologize for telling you the truth. Not about last night. About us. Patricia was quiet for a moment, and I could hear the television in the background, one of her afternoon talk shows, probably something about home decorating or relationship advice. What about us? Dad told me about the scrapbook. The silence that followed was absolute. No television, no background noise, just the sound of Patricia's breathing and the distance between us that couldn't be measured in miles. I don't know what you're talking about. Mom, it's okay. I understand why you keep it hidden. I understand why you can't say you're proud. But I need you to know that I'm okay with that. I don't need your approval anymore, but I'd still like your support. My support for what? For who I am, for the choices I've made, for the person those choices turned me into. Patricia's voice, when it came, was smaller than I'd heard it since I was a child. Do you know what it's like to watch your daughter choose a life that could take her away from you permanently? Do you know what it's like to go to bed every night wondering if tomorrow you'll get a phone call telling you she's never coming home? No, I don't. But I know what it's like to choose a life that matters over a life that's safe. And I know that the person who taught me to make that choice was you. I never. You taught me that some things are worth standing up for, even when everyone tells you you're wrong. You taught me that real strength means doing what's right, even when it's hard. You taught me that backing down from a fight you believe in isn't peace, it's surrender. I could hear Patricia crying now, soft sounds she was trying to muffle. I just wanted you to be safe. I know, and I am safe. Not because I avoid danger, but because I'm trained to handle it. Not because nothing bad can happen, but because I'm ready if it does. Are you going somewhere? Is that why you're calling? I thought about the classified briefing, about the hostages waiting in a compound halfway around the world, about the 20-minute window that would determine whether they lived or died. I can't tell you details about my work, Mom, but I wanted you to know that every time I go somewhere dangerous, I carry you with me. Not your fear, your strength. The strength you showed me when you raised a daughter who was too stubborn to stay in the box everyone wanted to put her in. That night, as our transport lifted off from the carrier deck, I looked down at the lights scattered across the dark ocean and thought about Patricia's scrapbook, hidden in her desk drawer like a secret she couldn't admit to keeping. Whatever happened in the next few hours, I was carrying more than just weapons and tactical gear. I was carrying the knowledge that love and understanding weren't always the same thing, but they could coexist in the space between fear and acceptance. The mission went exactly according to plan for the first 18 minutes. We fast-roped into the compound under cover of darkness, neutralized the guards, and located the hostages in a basement storage room. But as we prepared for extraction, everything went sideways. Enemy reinforcements arrived earlier than intelligence had predicted, and suddenly we were pinned down with 3 injured hostages and no clear path to the landing zone. Patterson's radio crackled with increasingly urgent updates from our air support. Viper team, you've got approximately 30 enemy fighters converging on your position. Extract the window closing in 90 seconds. Rodriguez looked at me, his eyes asking the question we were all thinking. Do we abandon the injured hostages and save ourselves, or do we risk everything to get everyone out? It wasn't really a question. This was why we were here, not to make the safe choice, but to make the right one. Patterson, tell air support we need 2 minutes. Chen, Williams, cover the stairs. Rodriguez, help me get these people mobile. What followed was the longest 2 minutes of my life. We moved 3 injured hostages through a compound swarming with enemy fighters, using tactical movements I'd practiced 1,000 times, but never under circumstances where real lives depended on perfect execution. We made it to the extraction point with 17 seconds to spare, hauling the last hostage aboard the helicopter as small arms fire sparked off the aircraft's armored hull. As we lifted off, one of the rescued hostages, a young aid worker who'd been captured 3 weeks earlier, grabbed my arm. "Thank you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was going to die in that place." "Not on my watch," I told her. 12 hours later, I was back at base, filling out after-action reports and preparing for the debrief that would dissect every aspect of the mission. But first, there was a phone call I needed to make. Patricia answered immediately, like she'd been waiting by the phone. "Maeve, are you okay? I saw something on the news about a rescue operation." "I'm okay, Mom. I can't talk about specifics, but everyone came home safe." "Including you?" "Including me." Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "I'm proud of you." The words hung in the air between us, simple and profound, carrying the weight of years of silence and misunderstanding. "I've always been proud of you," she continued. "Even when I was angry, even when I was scared, even when I couldn't understand why you chose such a dangerous path. I've been proud of you since the day you walked out of my house to chase something I was too afraid to support." "Mom, let me finish. You were right about what I taught you. I did teach you to stand up for what you believe in, to fight for what matters, to never back down when you know you're right. I just never expected you to use those lessons to become someone I didn't recognize." I sat in the quiet of my apartment, still wearing my tactical gear, still carrying the adrenaline of a mission that had tested everything I'd learned about leadership under pressure. "Do you recognize me now?" I recognized the daughter who used to build forts in the backyard and climb trees I was sure would kill her. I recognized the teenager who quit ballet to learn martial arts because she knew where her strengths lay. I recognized the young woman who was brave enough to walk away from everything safe and familiar to become who she was meant to be. Patricia's voice grew stronger, more certain. What I didn't recognize was that all of those things led to this, to you saving people's lives, to you leading other warriors, to you becoming exactly who you were supposed to become. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. 6 months later, I stood at the podium of the base conference center, wearing my dress blue uniform and looking out at an audience filled with military personnel, civilian contractors, and distinguished guests. I was receiving the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism during the hostage rescue mission, and for the first time since joining the Navy, my mother was in the audience. She sat in the front row next to my father, wearing a navy blue dress and a small American flag pin on her lapel. When my name was called and I stepped forward to receive the medal, Patricia Thomas, who had once called my military career embarrassing, stood up and started clapping. Then something amazing happened. The rest of my SEAL team, scattered throughout the audience, stood up as one. Rodriguez, Chen, Patterson, Williams, Kowalski, all of them on their feet, applauding not just the medal, but everything it represented. But they weren't the only ones standing. Commander Morrison rose from his seat, followed by Captain Hayes, followed by every service member in that room. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, in a standing ovation that echoed off the walls and filled the space with recognition, respect, and acceptance. As I looked out at that sea of faces, warriors who'd served beside me, officers who'd trusted me with their most dangerous missions, and in the front row, a mother who'd finally learned to see her daughter clearly, I understood something I hadn't grasped during that confrontation at Romano's. The argument had never been about whether I was embarrassing my family. It had been about whether Patricia could reconcile her love for me with her fear of losing me. Tonight, surrounded by people who understood both the costs and the value of service, she had her answer. After the ceremony, Patricia found me in the reception hall, her eyes bright with tears she wasn't trying to hide. "I was wrong," she said simply, "about everything, about your path, about your choices, about what it means to matter in this world. You've saved lives, Maeve. You've led people through impossible situations and brought them home safe. That's not embarrassing, that's heroic." She reached into her purse and pulled out a familiar manila folder, the same kind she'd used years ago to present college brochures and safe career alternatives. "What's this?" "Every article, every commendation, every mention of your unit in the press. I've been collecting them since the day you graduated from SEAL training."
Patricia's smile was shaky but genuine. I thought you should have the original copies instead of me hiding them in my desk drawer. I opened the folder and found myself looking at 3 years of my career documented in newspaper clippings and official reports. Patricia had been following my service from the beginning, watching from a distance as I became the person she'd been too afraid to support openly. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Because I was too proud to admit I'd been wrong and too scared to admit I'd been right. Right about what?
Patricia looked around the room at my teammates, at the officers who'd served with me, at the recognition and respect that filled the space like oxygen. Right about raising a daughter who was strong enough to choose her own path, even when that path led somewhere I was too frightened to follow. That night, as I walked Patricia and Dad to their rental car, she stopped and turned back toward the conference center where my SEAL team was still celebrating. They really respect you, don't they, your teammates? We respect each other. That's how it works. Patricia nodded, watching Rodriguez and Chen through the window as they recounted mission stories with animated gestures. I'm sorry I never understood that before. I'm sorry I thought respect had to look like my version of success. Your version of success taught me discipline, standards, and the importance of earning what I wanted instead of expecting it to be handed to me. I couldn't have done any of this without those lessons. Patricia hugged me then, really hugged me, the way she had when I was small and had scraped my knee or had a nightmare. But this wasn't about comforting a hurt child. It was about recognizing a daughter who'd grown into exactly who she was meant to become. I love you, Maeve. I've always loved you. I just needed to learn that loving someone means supporting their dreams, not limiting them to your fears. As I watched their car disappear into the night, I thought about the conversation that had started this entire journey. Patricia's voice in a crowded restaurant, telling me I was embarrassing our family with my military career. Tonight, surrounded by warriors who understood the value of service and sacrifice, she'd finally learned what I'd known all along. Some things are worth fighting for, even when the people you love most don't understand the fight. But sometimes, if you're patient enough and strong enough and stubborn enough to keep being who you are, they learn to understand it anyway. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they learn to stand up and applaud. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.